Hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone. So we are just giving a minute for others to join in. When people are joining in, just give us a minute. We'll start. Yeah, we will start while people are joining in. Yeah, so hello everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the knowledge session on the open how to harness the open banking potential through API assessment and benchmarking. So in this session, we'll largely talk about how the open banking is a gateway to the financial transformation. What are the new things that have come up, and what is the role of APIs all the way into the open banking per se, and how the registered entities can leverage regulated entity can leverage the open banking advantages. Also, something about the anything as a service. I mean, today, if you see, we have business models which are building on top of, say, lending as a service, payments as a service. So, why can't it be anything as a service? So that is how the API benchmarking, how to look at the perspective of anything as a service from the perspective of API benchmarking, and also the framework what we use for the API benchmarking, and a few of the examples from our case studies, our learnings perspective, that whatever we understood into the API benchmarking. So welcome everyone once again. I'm Vikrant. I'm working with Digital Fifth as a principal consultant, and I also have a company today of Pratap. Pratap is associate consultant at Digital Fifth, and he also works along with me on the API benchmarking and few other business and tech related assignments. Going ahead, just to introduce ourselves, a few of you would be new to the us, so I would like to just take a minute to introduce our firm, the Digital Fifth. So we have started in 2017 and gradually increasing into the number of people as well as the services what we are doing. And now we are 7 year old where we are working with top of the large clients out there, which is from the fintechs, banks, NBFCs perspective. For us, we about us, we largely been known for the Bharat FinTech Summit as well, which was attended by a few of you guys the last time as well. And in this space, which is into fintech and digital perspective, we are the ones who are top players among the Asia continent, I would say. And we also do are one of them who provide the programs on the fintech and digital finance perspective. That is from the training perspective. So training partnerships is and consulting are our key services out there. So from customers perspective, we are largely focused on India, but do have presence outside the India as well. That is on the based on the assignment as well as the the opportunity what we see. That way we try to explore outside India, but largely I would say our presence is in India largely because many of the new initiatives are coming in our country itself. From the customer's perspective, we work with large fintechs and enablers. Biz Diagram, Slice, Perfios, Credit Saison Omni, or JustPay. Also, do we work with banks largely on the advisory services, that is in the segment of large bank, medium banks, and small finance banks as well, and a payment bank as well. So we also do run embedded finance practice where we typically get involved into the larger accounts where we try to provide the embedded services, which is again one of the prominent topic of today's, right? So if you want to relate it, that is one of our key service where we work on the embedded finance side, where the non-financial players wants to include the banking and financial services into their offerings and services. International way, we do work on the way we have worked with multiple clients outside. And training side, we are very focused on the corporate trainings, which are in-house, I mean, in-person training largely, as well as the online trainings on the side. Yeah, we have worked with few of the government enablers. We do run the practice for investors, which is largely driven from the perspective of accelerators, be it technology due diligence for multiple investors per se. And so largely from that perspective, we have worked with many of the brands today. So from the team perspective, now we are 25 plus consultants, which are largely graduated as a MBAs and working with the technology enthusiasts as well. And from the customers perspective, we would be having 70 plus customers now, and would have been completed 100 plus projects. So from the value perspective, thought leadership is where we are very active from the embedded finance side or the fintech side, or be it digital transformation or open banking are the typical areas where we do go deep into it. And since all of the background of us is from the banking and the fintech ecosystem side, so we do have the practitioner approach. That is where we are able to relate to the problem very differently, and will be able to bring up the value proposition out of that. We do believe in the deep engagement. So unless we have sort of the engagement which is really deep into it, where we are mapped to the customers' thought process and their business thoughts and strategies, is where we try to relate deep into it. So we do run largest network as well, fintech network as well. Bharat Fintech Summit is one of them, but be it WhatsApp group or be it co-founders connects, which are largely been run for the focus group discussion on some of the topics, is where we do work differently out there. So yeah, talking about the Bharat Fintech Summit, we are just launched a few days back. Bharat Fintech Summit 2025, which will be our third in a row summit, which will be held on 5th and 6th February in Mumbai, India. So where we expect to have footfall of 4,000 to 50 plus speakers, and more than 45 panels on different segments and different interests as well. Likewise, last time we did it differently for the inclusion as well as innovation, and a few of the another initiatives as well. So workshops, demos, fireside chats, report launches, awards is something which we largely try to cover it into the 2 days. So last time it was great. I mean, thank you for all your support and attendance out there. So we would expect similar to happen in this year as well. We do also run online training services. Few of might you also be getting our emails on top of that. So apart from the digital payment, digital lending regulations, etc., we have also recently launched a dedicated program on the ONDC, which is largely 499 rupees for a single course. And if you want to buy the subscription, it will be 9,999, which will give you access to the additional programs which we are launching. And likewise, we have done already payments, lending, digital payments, digital lending, fintech, etc. What we are planning to launch just immediate is now will be on the account aggregator and ONDC. As I said, we have already up on the ONDC as well. So from the services perspective, we run consulting services, partnerships, corporate trainings as well. Just as I mentioned earlier, I'll just skip through it since it is repetitive from that perspective. So we do run on the strategy services, product and program management, risk and governance, risk compliance and governance practices. From the partnership perspective, we do run fintech and financial institutions partnerships, which are more on the collaborative and co-developing or co-building the products as well. Fintech Bazaar is something which we introduced as such, where we provide one-to-one discussions with fintechs and the buyer and seller community in short. Yeah, we do run accelerator programs as well, which is for the emerging players. So last Bharat Fintech Summit, we launched its first version, and we are continuing to running on top of that. So training services, as I mentioned, these are a few of the models which we work on, like introduction to fintech, lending, payments, open banking, digital banking. So largely all the practice areas where we work on, we try to go back and pick up the content on that, include the learnings from our assignments and conduct the training. So we do conduct the corporate training, and when we have been deeply involved into the some of the with some of the corporates where we have trained there more than 300 or 200 people at some places. We have dedicated training on the digital payments for one of the international entity where they wanted to understand how the digital payments can embed into their business in India. So that is where we work on largely on the training side. Coming back to the topic, not much of the time on other things. So, what we would like to cover it today is from the open banking perspective. So, I'll just start with that. Talking about the origin of open banking, so just try to understand what the open banking is, right? The open banking is the one where the banking services have been provided to the third-party service providers, which may not be into the financial domains. But these services will be provided through the connects of API, which banks will be exposing, and this will be used by the third party. So that third party can introduce the banking services into their web interfaces, applications, or any user interface which they are using. So how does it help is something we'll talk about it, or how does it work, that also we'll talk about it. But going to some of the value propositions is like availability of banking services that becomes one of the prominent area when it comes in open banking. Also the security and privacy enhancement through the data security and encryption. So likewise, when we provide the APIs, so the API has to be have the security standards written down. They should have the mutually but exclusive the data points where you can exchange the different security layers as well, be it on the two-way SSL certificate authentication, be it on the user ID password authentication. So many of ways to do that. Also on the innovation and competition by opening banking services as well, and the enhanced customer experience. Of course, when usually it happens that in the non-financial services app, where the customers get the option to do the financial services as well, the engagement becomes more and more what you can say deep engagement is something what you can build, and customer doesn't have to switch the application or the use cases perspective. So that is where the open banking becomes very prominent, and from the APIs perspective, the bank would be exposing its open APIs. So if I call about APIs largely divided into the two parts. One is somewhere you exchange the data, and another is where you exchange the services. So we'll talk a deep about it, how this bifurcation happens and what are the ways to identify or create this, you can say, bifurcation as far as catalog is concerned. Going to the basics, I know many of you might be knowing this. It might be repetitive stuff for some, but for the benefit of all, what is API? So API is a application programming interface. So it is a set of rules and protocols which are defined by the banks. In this case, banks, but in other ways, the server defines this, that what are the services that are to be exposed, and what are the communication channels you need to expose in terms to interact with each other. So that is where API senses. Are the APIs new? My take is APIs may not be new per se. APIs have been there in the earlier days as well. But what has changed the way this API has been constructed now? The APIs can be exposed outside the environment, outside the banking environment, and it can allow the third-party services also to engage onto the platform and use those APIs and provide the banking services on the non-financial or non-banking applications as well. So coming back to the definition of API, so it can be very closely related to the restaurant side, where there will be the waitress who will be coming you to pick up the order, and then she'll be passing out to the chef, and chef will cook the food and she'll deliver back to you. So that is how the API also works. So here is a customer is been defined as a client who raised the valid request, and the staff, which is again the protocol which is being used to communicate, will go and call to the server, and now server will process the request, generate the output, and send it back to the client. So that is how the API can be put in simple way. So there are different ways to define this, but we could relate it very easily for this example. Hence, we have picked up a very simple example as such. Can there be cases where these APIs can also be part of, you can say, the multi-layer or multiple processes? Yes, there are composite API or workflow APIs which are also been introduced into the market, where you will have multiple services embedded into one. That is where the concept of microservices also was been introduced, where a single process is break down into the smaller parts of it, which is only called as a microservices as such. But not to going deep into it, overall on the perspective of APIs, it's a simple call to server and get the required action done, and just generate the output and pick up that output and show it to the front end is something API is helpful for. Some of the common APIs across the functions is like from this is from the perspective what we have seen into the market. It will be a bit here and there from that perspective, like from the account management, payments, collections, trade, lending, other some specific APIs which have been defined, which are common across all the banking platforms as such. So where do we find it? From the perspective of if you are a developer and if you want to explore it, you can just try to check the developer portal of multiple large banks. Right? Basically, they have given this developer portal on the sandbox environment, where you can go and explore what are the APIs available with the bank and how can you utilize that for to generate the use case you want. So that is where this common APIs across the functions also can be defined as such. So coming back to the example, like as we were talking about the embedded finance, right? So this is one of the example which we are trying to put it, where fintech players wants to have a higher customer satisfaction and drive a greater lifetime value, as I was saying, to increase more and more engagement, and definitely the revenue as well is somewhere the fintech is looking out for. From the bank's perspective, for banks, it is very useful, since they definitely expands their access to multiple customers, to large pool of customers. Also, the one of the prominent factor is to get the customer and justify the cost of acquisition of that customer. So when you integrate with the fintech player, since they have already hooked many customers hooked on their platform, typically you have opportunity to convert them as your customer as well. So that is where it is helpful. So it lowers down the cost of acquisition in certain cases. The underwriting can be improved on based on the alternate data, because say for example, if the fintech player entity is somebody like accounting platform or a finance management platform, there you will get additional data point about that user, their user behavior. You will be also able to assess their income, their ways of their expenses, etc. That helps you to understand the user behavior, the financial behavior of the user, and also to provide them better opportunities to serve the customer. Yeah, the collections and the margins are also can be improved. So that is where the embedded finance products come into the picture. So if I want to say, like, banks will be providing their services to the fintech players, and fintech players will definitely leverage the tech infrastructure which is divided, which is provided by the banks through the APIs. So just to take an example, that what are the services can be offered. So if you can see here, these are the some of the products which you can be defined out there. So it can be savings, personal loan, account aggregator, etc. where on the one side of it, you will have the banks as a service providers. On other side of it, you will have the TSPs. Now there will be third party partners as well, like account aggregator. In terms of personal loan, you will have credit score entities. In case of savings account and personal loans will be again the offering which will be given by the bank. So from the fintech perspective, they'll be able to provide this bundled offering to the customer. And if you see in the backend, they'll be integrating with the multiple partners. So there will be some third party partners, there will be some partners which will be provided by the banks. So if you see at the core of it, everything is connected through the API. So for example, as an entity, if I want to provide a service where I can give the credit score to my customers, I will have to then integrate with the credit bureaus where I can pull the pull the score and the credit information report for that particular customer. Although the compliances are one part of it, I'm just giving this as an integration example, not going into the compliance side of it, because either way, you can't give this service as it is to anyone. Definitely, we'll have to go through the legal and compliance procedure for that. But from the tech perspective, if you see the integration, it is just the API integration which is there, which you will have to follow through. Yeah. Just extend this example like for the creation of account savings account per se. So the individuals will be on the fintech platform who will be requesting for the account creation, and then fintech will be calling the account creation API of the bank, and in the response they will get the account number. So there are multiple ways and means to do this integration. What we are trying to do is very simple example. We have picked it up because when you say creation of saving account, it will come after multiple cases. Like it will be first KYC check, you will have the customer onboarding, then you will have the basic FRM AML check in certain cases, and then to the savings account, and then providing the services for the customer. So this all will have the APIs just for the ease of movement and for the understanding. We haven't called out all, we have just listed down a very key, or you can say the very basic ones, which are definitely those will be there in the platform. Yeah. So that is how this has been defined as such. It works on open banking as such, works on very different models. Maybe here we can spend more time on it just to make the understanding clear, right? So it has been defined as a connected banking. Neo banking is one of the version of that, and banking as a service as well. So when we say connected banking largely where the bank's APIs are integrated into the third party platforms. So although here the difference would be the experience for the customers would be managed by the third parties, but that is up to certain level. After that, the all the the interconnected limits, etc., will be maintained at the bank side. So very limited space for there for the front channels, which acts as a view. But largely all the business logic and this, the services are pulled from the banking APIs. The another thing comes as a neo banking where this is sent directly to the customers, where the it will not have any physical branches as such. So taking example of neo banking, we'll have the retail neo banks and SME neo banks, where banks will provide certain services and these neo banks will be created, focusing on some particular set of customers based on their user behavior, their requirements. So you will be able to see that typically neobanks have segmented, like you will have a segment of SME neobanks, you will have a segment of retail neobanks, you will have a segment of neobanks which are largely serving particular to the millennials or young age working professional, as well as for the blue collars ones. So usually this has been defined in this way, like you will have a particular set of customer, you will create persona of that customer, create a segmented product for them, and just try to acquire the customer from that segment and serve them better. So that is where again for the financial services perspective, you will have bank in the backend which will be providing all the services which you require to financial services, I would say, which are required to serve that customer. And the other version comes, which is a banking as a service. So in a case of banking as a service, the services which banks have largely are being hosted onto the one platform, which where the services are integrated. So as a fintech or as a partner, you don't have to integrate with the for the each of the service with banks, right? You can integrate on the one single platform, which is in the backend already have integrated with the banks. So how does it help is it helps you a lot to minimize your integration effort. I mean, workflow perspective, architecture perspective, not much change into it compared to other things. But a major difference happens when where you drastically can reduce the integration efforts. Also, you don't need to worry about the upgrades which are happening, because largely the BaaS player here in between will take care of that for the third party partner. So that is how this has been defined in the three models as such. So connected banking is something which is very specific in a short note, and largely ERP has been using that. So just to give you an example, like if you have used any ERP system, you will follow that there are some options which are given to do the fund transfer, but that is a banking service which is embedded into the existing product. So that is how connected banking can be defined as. Neo banking, as I mentioned, we'll just repeat it again. It is a segmented product providing banking services or financial services on top of the user experience and the design which is been created focusing on particular set of customer segment. That is where the neo banking comes in picture. And banking as a service is are the platforms which provide banking services integrated through their platforms to the third parties, so as they can improve on the integration efforts for both for fintechs as well as for the banks. Because I mean, we spoke about the one side. If we want to talk about the other side, for bank to integrate with multiple fintech again can be a resource consuming as well as effort consuming experience. So what happens usually there is usually they integrate with the banking as a service player, which is where they integrate with only one platform, and any integration happening beyond for the third parties can be integrated through that platform. So that is also one of the way banks are trying to minimize their engagement efforts with the third party fintechs from the technological integration perspective. So business as always it will be done with the banks directly, but at least from the technological integration perspective, it will be helpful for the banks. So coming back to the ecosystem side, so ecosystem is where we try to define multiple segments and multiple parts of the particular segment. In this case, it's open banking as such. So from that perspective, this is the area where we would be talking about it, like API gateways, API integrators, so API validators. So API gateway players are the one who provides the platform, which is also called as the API gateway platform on top of your what you can say the infrastructure. So how does it help is like when this API has been exposed to the outside world, it will go through API gateway. So API gateway takes care of billing, managing all the API access related things. So which APIs should be accessible to which entity, which APIs are not accessible to other entities. Say for example, I'll just try to define that from not all APIs are open for all, right? I mean, for example, if you have as a bank must be having a API for say savings account opening or customer creation. It might be open for all the partners per se, but if they have any APIs which is related to modification of the customer, they may not be comfortable to open it for all. So it will be defined to particular set of users also. So that is where the API gateway plays its role, where you can define each partner, what are the APIs which are accessible to that partner, and what are the monetization component you want to call out for that customer is what you can put it on the API gateway. So it helps a lot for the billing purposes as well. API integrators is where the players would be helping to connect with the core system from the creation of APIs, development of APIs, or from the development of catalog, API catalog, or defining which are the APIs which you really require as a bank. Although there are all the core bankings nowadays have this layer of API on top of that where you can expose all the services, but it is there has to be some prioritization for this based on the business and the areas of interest and customers of interest. So that is where API integrators helps to either develop them or to build the API catalogs as such, or to help prioritization of different APIs. What are the APIs that you have to go ahead with first, and then follow back with the different set of APIs. I'm so sorry. Yeah. After that, we'll have the core banking platforms. We'll talk about it. API validators have been usually used as platforms which are used to test the API. So Postman is one of the prominent tool which has been defined as one of the API validator tool. Not much difficult to use. Maybe we'll not be able to cover it this time, but we'll try to see in next time if we can give some example on Postman tool as well, or else it is very easy to use. I mean, in one of the experiences like earlier, we had a team of we had a product and business team who were aware of how to test the APIs, because it was that easy. I mean, anyone can just go follow through it and start testing the APIs. It helps a lot. It helps a lot from the design perspective for the product team, and from the business team to understand what are the possibilities that we can pick up on top of that. So that is where it is very helpful out there. Just giving a basic background, what we discussed about it, that what do the API gateway players do? So they gives access to the bank API and partner more securely. They also help to do the handle user and partner onboarding, manage API integration, consumptions, monitoring and analytics, etc. From the API integrator tools, so largely building an experience, which is I was calling as a API catalog as well, and implementation of gateway solutions to integrate within the bank APIs, because largely we'll have API. I mean, building an API, as I was mentioning, is nothing new to the technology ecosystem as such, but how it has to be defined, what are the use cases that can be built on top of that, is something which is where the external efforts are being seek from the banks today. Yeah. So core applications which we talk about, which are these are the largely applications which provide their services on top of that, and these have been extended outside the banking, what you can say, the banking applications perspective, and can be used for the third party integrations as such. So maybe we'll take a pause here. So if you have any questions, you can pick it up. Maybe meanwhile, Pratap, you can say. If you have any questions, you can put it down in between in the question and answer session also. So we can pick it up as and when it is possible and required. We will also seek your feedback here to understand from you whether you are able to get the value out of it, or is there anything else you are looking out for, or is there any help that we can do to extend this? Yeah. So over to you, Pratap. You can cover this part. Yeah.
Right. Thanks a lot, Vikrant, for taking us through clearly what are APIs, what are the multiple variations of it, what are the commonly used APIs, what are the models per se. Now, taking a little bit forward into how is it relevant for the regulated entities? What are the different trends which are coming, and how can regulated entities use this advantage and enter into the open market, open banking as a very promising player per se? First thing, so as we already seen what BAS are, we clearly explain and some of the model of BAS. So the advantage that BAS brings to the table is that BAS players are connected with multiple regulated entities, banks, NBFCs who have multiple APIs or multiple services. For example, that some banks could be very great in terms of lending or in terms of payment. They could have multiple APIs or variations available. They will be able to take the advantage of all these players, collect all of that, and the same time expose it to multiple fintechs who can do it. In a plug and play kind of a service, today the fintechs who are launching a certain product can easily connect to a bank, to a BaaS player, and can utilize not just one bank's APIs, but multiple banks per se. In a RE's perspective, it's a very good advantage that they bring to the table. then now the REs do not have to connect to every fintech or an embedded finance player per se individually. Instead, they can connect to one BaaS player or multiple BaaS players for that example, for that matter, and they can service one or more fintechs. So what this brings for the REs is that they bring a huge amount of volume to the table. Connecting to one and the integration time and the go live time and the entire getting into the market time for every fintech is reduced. Thereby, within a single or a certain period of a defined period of maybe a certain period of 6 months or whatever months possible, at the same time they can connect to multiple fintechs and increase the volume per se. This will have a direct impact on the bottom line for the RX as well. So here, what we could see today is the BaaS players are, giving a huge go-to market advantage. As well as today, you could see banks are trying to get their own BaaS route. Like they're trying to, make their APIs very easy and very modular in such a manner that any BaaS player or the fintechs can come and integrate with them. So today you could see BaaS players are offering APIs across multiple services. It could be payment services like payment transactions or UPI NACH, auto pay setups, penny drop transactions, or in terms of creating virtual accounts. Or on the other side, in terms of banks, in terms of account creation, getting the balances, getting the statements, or a little bit more in terms of the DigiLocker, KYC services, and across plethora of services, right from payments to lending today, all the players today, BaaS players are ready to offer. They're starting to add more and more APIs into their portfolio to become a very comprehensive set of individuals per se. And in terms of neobank, where we already saw neobanking, where we already explained by Vikrant, we could see that neobanking are of two types. It could be two or multiple types for that matter. It could be consumer-facing neobanks, or it could be only specifically a niche neobank, for example, for blue-collar workers or women per se, or it could be SME neobanking per se. So today, among the SME neobanking space, we could see a huge amount of trends building up. For example, we could see a lot of REs trying to or preferring to partnering with multiple SME neobanking and to give their services. So this SME neobanking today evolving in such a manner, they are becoming one-stop solution for all the SMEs and MSMEs and all their operations. For example, if you see the plethora of services right from setting up an account, normal current account, savings account for the SMEs, as well as virtual accounts, which will help them in terms of recon and help them to manage multiple clients, mainly SMEs who are in small in nature but trying to deal with international transactions. For them, having virtual account help in compartmentalizing multiple clients and thereby helping them to do recon and get to know the transactions happening from particular clients per se. Or in terms of payments, we look at UPI auto pays or managing vendor payments or bulk payments per se. That is also possible. A little bit more into HR, which is payroll management. That is also today available in terms of lending, offering business loans embedded into the SME neo banking, or in terms of prepaid virtual cards or corporate cards given to them. So today we could see SME neo banking are becoming as a one-stop solution, as a super app for all the MSMEs to be, to go to and get all their services. So how is this advantage for REs? If the REs today have all of the services available, they can go and partner with multiple neobanks, and because they are becoming full-fledged in the market, they can easily tap into the MSME space easily with this SME neobanking. And then to move into trade finance. So if you see trade finance today is, even though it has a huge amount of opportunity present, it's still a bit complex. It is still tedious. There's still a problem of transparency, still problems in terms of tracking services, tracking how where a certain transaction is happening per se. By the sheer nature of the complexity as well as about the huge amount of transaction which is happening in the India level or the country or the international level today, trade finance has become a segment which is hugely untapped as well as a huge area for people to tap into. For example, today, if you see multiple banks have started, if they are already there into trade finance, they have started to expand their services, or those who are not into trade finance are also started getting into the trade finance and making API. Today, if you see commonly across all banks, there are at least few APIs available. For example, like a deal booking API, which will enable them to make transaction, I mean, currency conversion deals or to know the currency conversion rates. Well, these APIs are commonly present Along with them, bundle of other APIs for specialist international transaction services also provided. For example, like shipping bill of entry, for LC bills due, or for example, in terms of foreign bank guarantees, BG reports. So this kind of for these specialist services and international trade as well, APIs are starting to emerge in the market, and huge amount of international banks as well as the local banks are starting to provide these APIs. Now it's at the end of the day, it's now a matter of how not just the availability of APIs, which was the problem earlier. Today, APIs are becoming available. Now it's a matter of finding use cases and partnering with multiple players for the REs. So now that we have seen multiple trends emerging in and out of open banking, multiple models coming in, let's see how banks and REs, how could they crack the SaaS market? When you look at cracking the SaaS market and becoming a formidable player and becoming the most preferred player among the other third parties and fintechs to partner, there are three aspects that we have to look into. One is the product and journey. When you think about APIs, it does not need to be in separation. It does not need to be standalone. The APIs are supposed to be in a manner that is packaged and bundled for a certain use case or a product per se. We take lending, a bank has to ensure that all the APIs available for the entire lending journey is available with them. Having a bits and pieces of APIs and not servicing to an end use case might be a problem because that would mean that they would not be a preferred partner for a certain product. Next, in terms of architecture, well, we already seen the core architecture, the importance of architecture. We could see that for banks, looking at the architecture that is available with them, and then the capacity of this architecture is further important. And then in terms of tech innovation, performance, partner experience, all of this have to be looked into. Let's just go into detail of one of these, each one of these. One will be product and journey. As already said, the end use case or the final product needs to be kept in mind while designing the APIs and having the APIs available with the REs. The API that is available with the REs have to be exhaustive of all the services which is available for a certain product. Next, as it is, the APIs need to be flexible and adaptable. Today, the banks do not have flexibility in the API, either in terms of them modifying the APIs for multiple partners, or them not being able to have adaptability is become a challenge when they want to become crack the SaaS market. And then in terms of efficient interactions rest, to make sure that the APIs are frictionless and the latency in APIs are reduced are a critical factor. Next, in terms of architecture support, as already I was telling, the architecture of the bank or the REST has to be taken care of. So today, for example, if you see, we have seen in our experience of interacting with multiple banks, that banks might have multiple internal systems. They could have payment system, they could have a CMS system, CBS system, which have a huge amount of capacity and capability to offer services. But the APIs which the bank has is not able to have according to it. For example, today the CMS and the CBS might have 10 services, but the API that they have is only for three services. So while the capacity of the bank to go and partner fully depends upon the internal downstream systems and the capacity that they have, as well as the API. So the right mix of the availability of systems as well as the API to service this to the third party needs to be established. An API management platform, as we already seen before and explained by Vikrant, sir, we could see that API management platform become a middle layer which will help easy connection doing the recall of the API transactions, costing of the APIs, as well as keeping a track of the usage. Therefore, API management platform and the structure of around how it is being made has to be established. In microservices-based architecture, today we could see very little banks offering a monolithic kind of an architecture. We could see everyone going to a microservice-based architecture because of the sheer nature of how easy it is to plug and play those services. So that kind of a service, is it available with the RE? It's a question that every RE has to ask to themselves. Next, in terms of virtualization and containerization, the importance of this is, I do not have to explain it. The fact that how it will help in terms of BCPDR, how in terms of a disaster recovery could have been established in a virtualization setup. So these are something that needs to be kept in mind in terms of architecture. And in terms of tech innovation, so you could have all the APIs, but how good is it going to be if the innovation around that is not enabled? So bank has to ensure and the REs has to ensure what kind of innovation can be built upon the APIs. APIs can be bundled together to offer certain new product or use case. They could, and also the REs has to be open and to enable multiple people to come and try the APIs. to the importance of having a good sandbox and good place where people can come and try. It's very, very important. And for the people who are developers or any kind of fintechs who want to try the APIs, today banks have to make sure that their developer portal, which is providing the APIs, have quick access. They have all the APIs listed down. They are clear and concise and precise, and very easy for anyone to access. So these are important things in terms of tech innovation that is to be taken care of. And then to look at the API logs, network trafficking, history of databases, all of that is to be taken care of. Next, you look at performance optimization. So performance of the APIs, when you want any RE to become a huge player in the SaaS market, the main thing that you have to look at along with all of this is the performance of the API. Today, if you see for the common services for something like an FD creation or a loan account creation or a lending per se, almost most of the REs are able to provide the services. So if everyone is providing the services, it comes a question of how can we choose a certain RE over the other RE? The answer is pretty simple. Mostly it comes down to performance. If the API is not performing good, if it's not, there's a huge amount of latency, the success of the APIs is not guaranteed, then there is a high chance that a certain fintech can opt for a different bank and different APIs compared to a before one. Therefore, it's very essential for the banks to constantly look at the APIs and their performances, constantly start evaluating them, and have a plan in such a manner that they make sure that the API is always updated. So as already saying, monitoring of the APIs, the TAT of the APIs has to be reduced, and also number of requests. So that is one thing which you always have to take care of. For example, today, when you look at payments, payments is something which has been highly grown in terms of India. If you could see the number of API, API calls that you get out of UPI transaction, it is huge number that the bank today has to make specific plans just to deal with the API call that comes out of UPI transaction. So therefore, the number of API requests that it comes and the downstream and the application which is taking the the database which is getting hit to get the request and get the data in such a manner that should also be robust to support an RE in order to expose its APIs. Let's look at partner experience. At the end of the day, after everything's said and done, is the experience of the partners. For example, when I say partners, it could be the fintechs, embedded finance players, the banks are entering into partnership into them. Their experience is to be taken care of. You could have 100 APIs, but the question is all these 100 APIs required by the partner? Is all the 100 APIs being used by another fintech? Is all the 100 APIs being used, but is there 20 other APIs which they are required but the bank is not providing it? So having APIs which the partners are requiring needed in the market as well as giving good experience for the partner while consuming these APIs become very important. So how is the partner being onboarded? What is the support channels? What is the response time for APIs? And the testing environment, as I already said, and the sandbox environment available to test these APIs is very important for the partner experience. But now that we said all of this, let's look a little bit into the API assessment frameworks and how the RE can assess the API strengths as well as the system and to see percent. So what we do when we are looking at layers, so to get a little bit into, we have looked at multiple banks and we have helped with them in terms of assessing their APIs and how they can use it. What are the market, famous APIs? What are the most preferred APIs which is in the market? And what is the gap between the banks and the market is something that we do. So how do we do that and how do we enable it? First, in the current state section, we look at the current bank's architecture. It could be a certain architecture in terms of corporate banking use case of a CMS, etc., or in terms of a payment architectures or lending architectures. We first try to look at the system. So because as we already said, the extent of the API services is limited by the system that the bank has. Therefore, looking at the system becomes a very critical role. So first we look at the system at the current state and then do kind of a gap assessment when you look at the market and the APIs available in the market, trying to match between these two, trying to figure out the gap and give very actionable recommendation in such a manner that those APIs, if they start, recommending and do actions on this API, they could trying to start capturing more market share in terms of APIs and open banking per se. So, for example, this is how a current assessment report would typically be like. Well, this could be customized for each use cases. This is what we have when we talk and highlight over the current landscape, the product which is there, and the understanding, the insights, the gap, and the evaluation framework, which could be obviously customized. but standardly based on integration, flexibility, scalability, and adaptability systems. And next, in terms of API assessment, what we do in terms of benchmarking, what we do is we follow three-level benchmarking. It is a top-down approach that we follow. We start with the market. We look at across the market what is the APIs and how it is available, and then at an organization level, which could be at the bank level and RE level, is we look at across the organization level what are the APIs available, how are the systems being interacting and not deployed in the bank, and then at the API level, we also trickle down. We look at individual APIs, what is the latency, the performance of these APIs, and how for the end use case, which is the organization level or in the market level, how the APIs be able to service multiple clients. So in three level, we try to assess the APIs as well as the time. Next, yes, as I already told, organization level. And in organization level, what we do, we look at the portal experience, how the developer portal is it easily accessible, is all the API documentation present, is all the API documentation relevant, is all the facts of API right from request to response and to the orchestration of this API is clearly given in the portal. And the navigation, the experience of API consolidation is something that we look at. And in terms of API level, we looked at the API documentation. So what we do is go each and every API. We look at the API documentation. We look at the formats, the flowcharts which is available. And then the sandbox environment, which is enablement to testing, the security features. So that is something that we do. And then in the market level, we look at the bank's architecture, the client experience, security features. This is some stuff that we look at. And then finally, recommendation. So how would we recommend, as already told, the three-step process that we follow. And then again, going back to a framework, which could be about looking at the client expectation, experience, excuse me, etc. So these are something that we look at. So in an architecture level, a developer portal level, and API level. And then along with the performance, integration, scalability, and the final report, which will have a huge amount of insights and recommendations. So this is how most of it is structured. So I'm just looking into one of the case studies. So this particular case study was where we worked about was with a certain public sector bank. So this leading bank was having a huge amount of services. They have been established in the market. But what they wanted to do when they were established in the traditional market, they wanted to enter into the open banking space. They wanted to expose the APIs, create APIs according to the market which is there and the most APIs which is in the market. So what we did is this is a very crisp and as well as a very effective assignment that we did, which could be across almost like a month or two, a little bit more than that, around that. When we entered into the bank, we looked and clearly did a full assessment of the entire systems, and then we figured out where are the APIs coming from, what are the services offered by the downstream system is the bank is catering to or taking the advantage of. We looked at all of those, and then we looked at the market. We had huge amount of interviews. We looked directly, went into multiple competitors, and then figured out what are the advantage and what are the new things that they bring to the market. So this particular segment was specifically to corporate API suites. So we are concentrated on that. Then it does not have to be limited to that. We can do across the entire domain. So as I was saying, we went into that and then we did a gap assessment and we were able to come up with a very actionable recommendation where we could say how to improve the banking architecture, and what they did, it was able to improve their market penetration and the bank was able to establish themselves as a formidable player in terms of an open banking. So we were able to help or enable the bank compete with top banks and top private banks today. So that is how this assignment entirely went. So a little bit more into it, we were looking at the current state, evaluation of the features and capabilities. What we did is also a market understanding report that we provided along with fixed security message and compliance issues that we did. And yeah, compliance. So while we always talk about API benchmarking in the perspective of tech, it is not just limited to tech. For example, the APIs this needs to be available needs to be in congruence to the RBI's compliance direction that it comes. So we having compliance practice also as a full-fledged practice available in Digital Fifth. We carry with ourselves the compliance knowledge that we bring in. Therefore, when we are doing an API assessment, we always keep that also in mind to ensure that every API that is available and the recommendation that we give is always compliant to the RBI, and then assessing the ease of integration, and then in terms of decision API suggestion. So at the end of the day, who will benefited? Everyone in terms of product team, they were benefited in terms of understanding of API utilization, etc. The business team, they were able to increase their the business per se, as well as innovation and opportunity in the market. The technology team, obviously, they were the one who was mostly gaining it, which could be like them, getting a quick assessment of the architecture and then creating of middlewares and how payment hubs kind of an innovation that we can bring into the market. The development team, at the end of the day, the development teams were the most happy. Well, we gave them the recommendation of developer portal. They were ready to take it up and then easily start implementing that in their websites as well as the developer portal. And yeah, so these across teams, which could be product, business, tech, and development, they were always helpful because of this assignment, as well as the current application and then final recommendations, which is easily picked up by the bank. So yeah, this is what we have did across public sector bank. And there were multiple other examples, but we thought that we'll highlight one particular one. So this is our entire approach to API benchmarking. So to conclude, what is something that I would say is API benchmarking is does not have to be an individual exercise. It does not have to be a very complex exercise, but it is a very critical exercise which every bank has to do. And we have proven experience in doing it, and we will always be there to help and guide you in any kind of nature or to do the entire API benchmarking per se. So yeah, I'm just taking a pause here. So I think already we have the feedback form in the chat. So anyone who wishes to give us any kind of feedback in terms of improvement that we can do, or any kind of future webinar that you want, or certain topic that you want to listen to, is something that you can always go through the feedback form. We can always give you suggestions. So, answering to a particular question, yes, for all those who give us feedback, we try to ensure that we give the deck to them and to them specifically. So, I would encourage everyone to give feedback so that we could always get the advantage of getting the decks posted. Uh, Thanks a lot, team. It was thanks to get a huge amount of response as well as getting questions per se. We would always come back with multiple webinars per se. Even in the next week and the upcoming weeks, we are coming up with multiple topics. So I would request you to stay connected with us and then to look at the webinars and and then contact us in case of any engagements. So thanks a lot, team. Thank you.